Are the Gen Z in a frenzy?
I don't call Gen Zs a frenzy. I prefer to call them young and restless.
What makes the Gen Z such a hot topic?
Gen Zs came in the middle of chaos. They are the first generation who grew up with the internet. That makes it very challenging. The Gen Zs have never tried to fit in at all. They've always been originals. They'll be digital natives. They believe in creating their own niche. They don't go with the flow. They find their flow.
Do you find something different between the millennials and the Gen Z?
The world is moving towards sustainable living, and organizations are looking at sustainability in a long run. So today, I always tell even my students, it's not about profit maximization, it's about wealth. So let's say TikTok, for instance, you have 1 billion subscribers, 60% of it is Gen Z. So where does your revenue lie?
Hi guys, welcome to my channel, The Missing Link with Amit. And today's topic is the Gen Z frenzy. And to handle this topic, I had with me Anala Padmanabha.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you so much for finding time to join on the show today. Anala is a chartered accountant with a distinguished experience over 20 years in the thick of the corporate world, including social entrepreneurship and education. She had worked in varied industries like IP services, manufacturing, corporate governance, and also served as an independent director on the board of different companies. Unlike also a mother of a teenage daughter, a Gen Z, and invests a lot of time and effort as an educationist, which makes her work closely with students, faculty, parents, and the management of such institutions. So, am I lucky to have Kerala? Yes, I hope my viewers will also feel lucky when we go through this. Again, thank you very much. Okay. So, Anala, tell me, how do you feel to be as a guest on the channel of mine, The Missing Link with Arts?
It's fun. Yes, it's fun. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I don't know what you're going to throw at me. Anyways, I'm excited.
Yeah, so as you know that of course we talked a little bit about it, and we decided bit of what clicked between both of us and Vinay, our good friend, that we label this episode as the Gen Z frenzy. So my first question to you is: are the Gen Z in a frenzy, or is it the others, the Gen X, the millennials, or their parents who are in a frenzy?
Interesting question. Very interesting. I don't call Gen Zs a frenzy. I prefer to call them young and restless. Yeah, so that's what they are right now.
But when they meet the millennials or their parents are to manage them,
To the middle,
you feel that they are in a frenzy?
they are in a frenzy.
Yeah.
Yes, they are in a frenzy because there are reasons why they are in a frenzy. Yes, but the Gen Zs are very young and extremely restless. That's what they are right now. But the frenzy part is around the people, or the people that are encapsulating the Gen Zs.
For our viewers, we can say very confidently that the Gen Zs are not in a frenzy. It is others around them. Including your parents probably who sometimes feel they're in a frenzy, but they would say because of the Gen Z, isn't it?
Perhaps they're missing the translation part.
I mean, that being something I want to mine your mind for and your experience, for example, because you spend a lot of time not only in teaching in the institution that you teach, but also you have a Gen Z daughter, yeah, for example. So now, you have worked extensively with people in the US, Europe, Middle East, and also, as I understand, very intensely inside our whole country in India, all right? And you also work as a faculty in different business schools where all your students are Gen Zs. What makes the Gen Z such a hot topic? I mean, after all, see, both you and I were also teenagers or early 20s sometime back. Nobody relevant to us, and I feel I'm supposed to be living a boomer, baby boomer. I didn't when I was in that age, what is referred to as Gen Zs today, nobody even took notice of that, because probably we were not so much material to whatever is happening. So today's Gen Zs So why is this topic so hot? Why people talk about Gen Z?
That's a long question, by the way.
Yeah, but I just wanted to, kind of share the thoughts around that question in my mind. So why is Gen Z a hot topic in India today? That's my question. In India.
Because Amit, there are so many dimensions that this question brings. Number one, as millennials or Gen X or somebody previous to that, they never had to, establish themselves as a generation.
Okay.
Gen Zs came in the middle of chaos. They are the first generation who grew up with the internet. See, that makes it very challenging. Perhaps you and I never woke up to internet. The first thing you do when you're off bed is check your mobile. We don't do that. We never did that as growing up, isn't it? We were more structured. We were more we did things in a very defined way. There was a lot of cultural intonation to what we were doing. But I don't call what Gen Zs have is a non-cultural issue, but that's a different type of a culture because they grew up as the first generation.
Smartphone.
Yes, with smartphones and internet. So that's why we call them as digital natives. Yeah, they're natives to the digitization, actually. So being a digital native, their expectations, the way they operate, the way they think, and the way they articulate is very different to what we think and feel.
Do you think the last one that you said, the way they articulate, is that one of the reasons that the people around them are in a frenzy?
Absolutely. Because they beat the stereotypes.
The beat is sure.
Absolutely. So there's no structured process to that.
And that's why we are all expecting that them to fit the A stereotype.
Absolutely.
And they don't fit at all anymore.
No, they've never tried to fit in. The Gen Zs have never tried to fit in at all. They've always been originals, then being digital natives. They believe in creating their own niche. They don't go with the flow. They find their flow. That is what is creating the frenzy.
We'll come to this part whether, about the extent of originality that is there, because after all, we all are influenced by something. But we come to that later on. But I understand on a relative level, they are definitely absolute originals to not only me, almost a bygone baby boomer, but even to the millennials or maybe the older millennials and the Gen Xs. Do you find something different between the millennials and the Gen Zs?
Absolutely. There's a lot of differences between the two. See, the Gen Zs range from the year of birth from 96 to 2010. People who are born in the span of time is what are the Gen Z, and everything beyond that is millennials and the Gen X and all that. But the millennials were raised, they came into the technology renaissance, but the Gen Zs lived through it. So that's the difference, The millennials just saw the renaissance. It was just opening up, but the Gen Zs lived through it. Just to think about it, you are a digital native, number one. You do have an economic collapse. Then you do have inflation hitting you. You do have COVID-19, a pandemic, the global politics and the wars that are taking place. It definitely puts you in a very uncertain situation, Millennials never had to go through any of this.
So the millennials still had a taste of the relative certainty part of
Absolutely.
like that if you have lived probably post World War II.
Absolutely.
For example. That's interesting. Would you like to also, because my channel is also, largely viewed by people who are managers, leaders in organizations. And when somebody has to manage Gen Zs, because of course the young crop in the organizations today are all Gen Zs, for example. And then you have the younger millennials and the little bit older millennials. But here, I hear a lot of discussions from here and there about, it's quite tough. But what is the best way to manage this Gen Z in an organizational context?
The first thing that you'll have to identify is Gen Zs don't come with a defined rule because they have never tried to fit in. This is the thumb rule for every Gen Z. But don't you think in some way or the other, that's what organizations also want in the long run? We don't want to be just stereotyped. We've always went against the stereotypes. That's where we've created this complex organizational structures across the world, isn't it? And the way we look at personal training, for instance, We look at mental well-being, and we look at employee, well-being, and a lot of it is invested on these aspects. But the diversity aspect, the equity aspect, equality aspect, these are something that vibes with Gen Zs today. Gen Zs love these kind of concepts, and sustainability. The world is moving towards sustainable living, and organizations are looking at sustainability in the long run. So today, I always tell even my students, it's not about a profit maximization, it's about wealth. So we'll introduce new systems of accountings across the world, new organizational structures. We are accounting for the human capital, we are accounting for carbon footprint. We are doing a lot of things. So where is this all leading us? It's leading to sustainability. And Gen Zs are acers when it comes to sustainability. They do believe in sustainability. And that is the reason they don't fit in. They challenge every aspect of the decision that the organization makes when it is driven towards profits. This is something that never fits with a Gen Z. And this eternal conflict that it is created in the organizations, the Gen X or the millennials find it extremely difficult to assimilate. Because the millennials came with that thought process, isn't it? Because when they were a part of the IT renaissance, they were trying to build organizations, the $1 trillion club that we have today. So they were trying to build, they were busy slogging and slaving themselves out to build it.
That's very interesting. Well, how you put the last words of slogging and slaving. And probably they were in the train which finally came to a stop. But in a nice place or not, that's a different question. That brings me to this point that, and I must admit that this is something I hear. I hear that the Gen Zs they don't like to become a part of a collective work culture. And kind of you what you mentioned also rhymes with that. Or they have a strong sense of entitlement that they do not adhere that much to warm, to respect or commitments or relationship. But that's a lot of words. But I'm just quoting. Maybe you can handle one by one. Is that true? Is my question that they do not like to become part of a collective work culture. Start with that one.
They don't want to. That makes them very anxious. Because the other side to Gen Zs is declining mental health. Okay? That is one of the reasons why organizations are so invested in mental well-being today. Because majority of the workforce are Gen Zs today. So let's say TikTok, for instance, you have 1 billion subscribers, 60% of it is Gen Z. So where does your revenue lie? And I just gave you an example of TikToks. I can give you examples. The American retail industry is run over by the Gen Zs now. I mean, there is a different styling culture. There's a culture that they've developed, which just allows you to be you. So the American retail industry is taking a very different frame altogether. With all this, you're putting Gen Zs in the center. And you're part of an economic collapse. You have the Russia-Ukraine war. You have unstable economic conditions all around the world. Inflation is rising. Definitely makes a generation anxious.
That I can very well understand, but for the same reasons, barring the styling and the fashion, probably think that in America, that you said, has developed centering on the Gen Z, so that's a market issue probably also. But the anxiety part is true for even the millennials because they also have a long way still to go. And all these wars and the inflation and the chaos that we see, including the size of leadership, different kinds of alienation that is going on. I'm sure there is a difference between the Gen Zs in India and the Gen Zs in the US. And I'm sure that there are Gen Zs in Japan, which might be quite different from the Gen Zs in maybe Germany, for example. Let's get into the Gen Zs in India. Because, not because we are Indians, but because, we are sitting and living in India. And I have personally, for sure, a little bit of more interest in first understanding how it goes with our Gen Zs, because both you and I have to spend time with them, for sure. So, I mean, you mentioned here they don't want to be part of the collective work culture. Well, that is true. Why are they perceived or seen as that they have a strong sense of entitlement? Why?
Entitlement because they want to find their tribe. That's what it is. See, if you look at a Gen Z, and these people don't scroll the net the way we do. They are online, but they are not consuming material online. They are participating online. So what they do is they create their own tribe. So they want like-minded people. They want people who can resonate with their thought process. They want people who can vibe with them. That is the word they use today. So if you don't, that is why you don't see Gen Zs partying in big places. You find them in internet cafes, corner coffee shops. You see a lot of people hanging out in these places, and they stick to their tribe. A larger work culture in organization makes the matches. And that is one of the reason they can't gel with people.
But they have this perception that they do not want to adhere to those, I don't know whether I should say, old sentiments like warmth, respect, um, commitments, or relationships. Is that true also?
It is. It's their fear playing out. Because as I told you, they grew up in a culture like that. I mean, if you come to think of it, I ask you to think from a different perspective altogether. The millennials, when I said they were in a part of technological renaissance, when they were there, did they have the time to look into what the Gen Zs were looking at? We created the monsters. We created the technologies. We made our lives easier because we wanted to build a $1 trillion cloud. I mean, aren't we partly to be blamed for what you created? Because we were busy building something that is larger than life. And today, let me give you another thing. Gen Zs are not invested in AI the way millennials are. And I can see why. Because the millennials find it extremely uncomfortable to get along with the Gen Zs because they're too independent. And Gen Zs find millennials too culturally driven, very structured. So the clash is bound to happen. The answer to it is Gen AI.
So is this also something to do with that the Gen Zs on one side are, you say, hunting for their tribe, but they do not want to belong to an existing tribe?
No, not at all. This is what creates a culture in it, right?
Yeah, the kind of active status quoist, which reminds me, I don't know whether our viewers who are Gen Zs or millennials will find it relevant or not, but I'm sure you can probably connect to it. When my generation, I'm mid-60s and I was growing up in Delhi. And when I tell my children who are millennials, mid-30s, about the emergency or about, my buying and my tribe buying and all those Russian novels from the pedestrian, from the, what do you call it, the payments of novels, and reading them all up, probably I gobbled up Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, etc., and all that. My son says, I can't relate to a Dostoevsky. Yeah. But for me, when I was doing that as a Gen Z of those days, of course, those labels didn't exist in those days due to different reasons, I'm sure. But we were the actually anti-status quoists. We were always the people who were thinking whatever is going on in my country is all crazy, all bullshit. Okay. So we will do something different. But we didn't have too many evidence. Today, the Gen Zs probably books to the internet, thanks to social media. They can vent their feelings anywhere and everywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that is probably why they are in the search of a tribe, because they have the hope that they will find somebody in this queue.
And that is why they're online. That is one of the reasons they're online. Gen Zs do not fear making friends online. Millennials have a problem with that. But I wouldn't completely put the blame on millennials again. I mean, because I think this is a conflicting interest. I mean, this is a shift that is happening, which is going to change with the alpha and the betas. It's going to completely change because they will be the second and third generation of internet users. The way they consume online content is going to be much, much different to a Gen Z. It's already changing. The way they look at it is much, much different to what the Gen Zs are doing. But then again, the millennials came from a certain school of thought, as you rightly mentioned. So that school of thought puts us on a pedestal.
Ah, that's an interesting point. And when I am growing up with a younger generation, be it Gen Z or Alpha or Beta tomorrow, and I see somebody kind of posing that he or she on a pedestal, obviously I don't like it.
Absolutely.
I mean, even my mid-60s, I don't want to look at somebody and telling me, oh, I know everything, and you don't know. So that way, the Gen Z's, the reaction is, I think, quite meaningful. And you mentioned that it's not a question of blaming anybody. Of course, we all are formed by the, environment that people grow up in. But let me come to this point that, but what is the impact on the parents of these Gen Zs? How specifically? Because I know you spend a lot of time with the parents, faculties, not only the students. That's why I'm asking you this question. What is the impact on the parents? And they are normally late millennials, correct? Right? So, but they don't look at this millennials or there's excess. They look at a parent. Their parent is a parent.
Absolutely.
And you are a Gen Z parent. So, without getting personal about it, again, as somebody who spends time in also social entrepreneurship, for example, not only teaching, what is the impact on the parents of Gen Zs?
It's difficult. It's very difficult for them. I mean, I can give you a couple of examples if I may. I don't want to name, but I would definitely give situations. Now, while dealing with a couple of students and their parents, I came across one student that really kind of made an impact. The guy is a creative genius. I mean, he really wants to be an entrepreneur. He wants to do a lot of things on his own terms and conditions, a Gen Z. He has parents who are extremely clingy. That's the word. Now, the clinginess comes not from anything but the fear of losing. So there is this tremendous amount of control that's exercised. The control is so vast that it has pretty much crushed the kid's personality. Now, the question again you need to ask is it worth the time and effort from both sides? Now, the kid is a Gen Z, pretty much clueless, anxious. They don't know how to find their tribe. Some of them do suffer with that. They don't know how to find that. And that difficulty poses them to be failures in societies. And that is when a millennial can,
At least to start with, a misfit.
not a misfit to say completely, but they would just revolt. That's the word. They would revolt to everything because it's their fear playing out in a very different way. Because they can't categorically call it as fear or anxiety or depression. We know these terms because we've articulated what they mean. For a millennial, it's a lot more easier.
I find the expression that you took very, very special and meaningful. You said that the parents are clinging. And this reminds me of also the root cause of narcissistic tendencies, because
Which gives way to one.
so one of the aspects that, and I'm sure you know this as much as I do, that narcissism being a pathological disorder, as would say, it starts from this parenting. Either the parents are too clingy to use that word that you use, or they are completely oblivious. They tie goes up without any sense of attachment. In fact, we are going to do an episode on narcissism later. I think we should. Yeah, and because I got this feedback that the Gen Zs have this sense of entitlement. They have this kind of narcissistic tendencies, and you helped me to identify where probably this is coming from. Because the parents are too clingy, it can lead to the search for identity, and that may then later on, as in the adult phase, kind of metamorphose into a search or need for both fame and power, and that's the narcissism.
Which is true. Because see, this particular case that I spoke about, the student cannot relate to the tribe that he's a part of because there is nobody that he can relate to.
And it is being forced to be.
To be there. And Gen Zs don't agree that. They've never lived their life that way. Me being a parent of a Gen Z, I think I go through this similar thing. At times I do get a little clingy and it's out of love, it's out of safety,
Out of fear.
out of fear. I mean, I don't blame the millennials for it. But then it also takes an ugly form sometimes.
Yeah, because why I asked you the question about the parents, because I did try to get some inputs from parents of Gen Zs, and even if it was nothing not personal for each of them as an experience, but they gave me the inputs about that we hear of drug abuse, we hear of suicide. I mean, this apartment that I live in, there was a 16-year-old who committed suicide, jumping on a 14th floor, and the parents had no clue why. 60-year-old child's parent had no clue. They had everything. They had number of cars they needed, a nice apartment, dog, everything. They thought they provided everything for the child, but again the child jumped. So it's very sad for sure. And that's the reason. And it's really helpful when you give this example of clinginess or parenting or clinging parenting. It's not to, I'm sure that our brothers is not to point fingers at any particular parent. We are also parents. And and that may give rise to this sense of loneliness and sense of, wanting to find my own tribe. And that's what we see. That's what takes us to Genesis. And then somebody brings in something and we say, oh, this is the Gen Z problem. It's not the Gen Z problem at all.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. Because also Gen Zs also love to tread on the untrodden paths. And that makes it a little dangerous given the fact that the kind of content they're exposed to today, the kind of things that they are exposed to today. So is there a regulation in place? No, not really. Though it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. They love to live in this anonymity. And they want to tread into these darker, deeper crevices with the hope that they're going to find something very innovative, very creative, or maybe they might find their tribe there. Something
Different to what they're being taught in.
Yes. So this balance is needed. That's what I say. It's not that there's anything wrong with the millennials, but now millennials have to learn where to draw the line. But then staying within the parameters of how they want to mentor their kids, they really have to mentor it in a way which is very Gen Z suitable, because that's what even the organizations are adopting to today. They have a language they speak which just doesn't resonate with any of us. They have a very crazy language, okay, which sometimes I fail to understand, and I have to call an interpreter to say, what did you just say? I struggle with this. And then you also want to mentor them in a direction where you want them to bring results, but give them a certain amount of space and time and make them see reason, purpose. Give them a purpose. I think they would do very well.
Absolutely. So why, this theme for this season, is about leadership styles at Carve Your Own. And you exactly, touched on the two main important points, that it's about the leadership from the parents or teachers or, whoever, uncles and aunts who miss being addressed as uncles and aunts maybe and blame it, the so-called Gen Z tribe. But the point is this, that have we given that space to them? Have we tried it out? Did we take the risks? Okay, why still marking some boundaries, but all we are actually rather withdrawing the boundaries even closer and closer, and then this clinginess comes in over there. And I'd like to come to this point again. For me, I do not know. I do not really get the chance so much to interact with the Gen Zs because I'm half-retired that I spend more time, in consulting and coaching, mostly middle and senior management. So therefore, these are the inputs I got there, and one of the things I mentioned earlier is that they are perceived as people who do not want to make commitments, or they don't really get into building relationships. For me, it sounds similar, commitments and relationships, but then I'm a so-called baby boomer, So, again, my question, is that true? And if so, why?
It's true with every Gen Z. They're scared of commitments. They're scared of relationships. Perhaps it's in my understanding of with the people that I work as Gen Zs, the way they witness a relationship is much different to how we perhaps perceived. And I think that is one of the things that stops them. But then I had to step back a bit and take you through a certain, things with these Gen Zs, why they are the way they are.
Tell me where I want you to go.
Yeah. See, what happens is, I told you that because they are in the middle of all these things, the chaos. So there is a certain amount of denial. It's too psychological for them. They're in a state of denial. Like perhaps if you see somebody who is a Holocaust survivor in World War II, you see there is a certain psychological impact. And somebody who's been through the concentration camps, for instance.
Or somebody who is gone to the Indian partition.
Absolutely.
They don't want to really bet it.
And it fundamentally changes them in some way or the other. And when I said the millennials were a part of the technological renaissance, and then that brought about the cultural shift. That shift has impacted the Gen Zs. Now, what has it impacted? It has impacted them psychologically.
And how?
Well...
Oh, no, sorry, why?
Because A millennial is working and slaving to build organizations.
And also their family.
Yes, and we're largely nuclear. I mean, because we're working in the cities, we don't have joint family systems. Yes, and
Not living with the parents.
grandparents. We don't know the nuances and the subtleties of these
So all the
relationships.
system that the millennials grew up in is no longer available for the
Gen Zs, no. And there is not enough mentoring because nobody has time. Nobody has time. Because we ourselves are guilty of it. When the kid is all upset, they give him or her a tab. Because we're busy doing what is that? Yes, we're busy doing something else. So it is impacting him or her, as the case may be. We are not judging the magnitude of this impact. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure there are many parents who are as guilty as I am. You want to go out somewhere. Taking your kid becomes imperative, but then the kid has its own voice, and you just want to keep the kid occupied. Give him or her a tab or a mobile. So he or she is watching something that's whatever it is.
I was recently in a social picnic, and I was noticing there were particularly one girl and one guy. And there's a large place, people were playing cricket and singing, and you know what happens at the picnic, some people are busy cooking and all that. It was a family picnic. I observed these two people, they were not even sitting together. They were sitting actually kind of poles apart. And one was reading a book, another was reading, reading a phone. Okay? But they were not mixing with anybody else, and there were some 70 people there.
Gen Z for you. It's Gen Z.
And as a parent of a Gen Z, for example, I think as a parent, I can't say that parents have figured out what to do, but they are at least in the process knowing you're figuring out. Whether we find the right way or not, that's a different issue. I don't think we can cover that in one podcast. This is a huge issue. But yet, what I would like you to address is, what would you suggest to the Gen Zs, or at least adult Gen Zs? Okay, not the 13, 14-year-olds, although they may think, and rightfully so, that they're also adults, but I'm talking about people who are in the workforce.
Right.
Okay, what would you suggest to them? How do they, because they're adults now, they understand what's going on. They understand that, yes, others are looking at us like this. Okay, we are the so-called probably anti-status quoists, etc. So whatever words they have for themselves. I may be too old-fashioned in my vocabulary, but yet I do understand that they will understand. They're equally intelligent, if not more. Okay. What would you suggest? How do they handle this? Because if they have to be what I believe individuals are, not should be, everybody is a leader. Okay, right? So as a leader, which is about how they lead their own life, each individual Gen Z who is in the, how would you suggest that they handle this challenge that their parents face? Because one thing is that the parents have to work out what they do as parenting anymore. But another thing is that a 22-year-old or a 24-year-old doesn't have, and they don't even believe that they need any solution from this. They don't want to be spoon-fed, right?
Not at all.
Right? So what would you suggest? And I'm sure you have done this as a teacher, as an educationist, or a social entrepreneur also. So I would like to mine your experience and your knowledge of this. How would you suggest that Gen Z should manage their own leadership? That means how do they lead their life while they're able to understand that, all these other factors around me, okay, they're trying mainly, but I can't relate to a thing. So what could you suggest? I hope I could get question to you.
Absolutely. See, before I answer your question, I just tell people that there are two types of Gen Zs. The first one is the older ones who are already into the workforce. They're paying their mortgages. They are in the workforce. Second one are the preteens, teens and the preteens that you have. Now, the best thing to handle the Gen Z, the leadership style that perhaps even the millennials have to adapt to, and the organizations likewise, is to lead from behind. You don't call yourself a leader, but you call yourself a mentor. You call yourself a coach. You tell them that you're here to help, and you allow them to make mistakes. And you ask them, how is it that they're able to contradict these mistakes or contemplate these mistakes, comprehend it, articulate it, and what are the plausible solutions they can come out with. It's what I do as a teacher, as a parent, and even as somebody with the corporate. I always lead from behind. I am the last one standing. I would allow my team to move forward. I would take the credit towards the end. But then what I'm doing is I'm giving them this support, this psychological support that, it's okay to mess up. I'm the failure. And that particular feeling, but then you don't allow them to make mistakes over and over again. That's where mentoring kicks in. So beyond the
And also guardrails and processes that
Absolutely.
at least in an organization.
Absolutely. And you'll be surprised to know, Amit, that Gen Z are very idealistic people. They believe in ideals and ideologies. That is why they are heavily into climate change and everything else.
So that's what all people, when they are younger, they are very idealists. Thank God they all represents believe it's a bit corrupted, right? But that's not another one. But thank you for also you mentioned the mentor or the coach, and I coach executives, and the way you said is exactly what a coach is supposed to do. A coach doesn't tell. And also it brings me to something that we were talking before we started the podcast about the wireless stage, For people who are not aware, in short, if I can explain that, the Indian wisdom for Turkey's centuries is about these 4 stages of life, the brahmacharya ashram, the grihastha ashram, the malaprastha, and the sannyas. And I think we agree that there is no sannyas possible nowadays. But a good manager, good leader today probably has to understand what to do when you are in vanaprastha. You are available, but you are not telling people what to do. Some people can come and knock on your door, Amit or Anala, please wake up. I need your help. Can you help me? So you really need my help? Okay, let me come on. Then you try to help. So that's the space that you are recommending. But I want you to also suggest to the Gen Z how they can lead their life.
See, that's something that Gen Zs should know, because the problem is, on one side, Gen Zs feel they're misunderstood. That's always the case. And on the other side, they don't show there's a lack of commitment, there's a lack of integrity at workspaces. They don't know how to value relationships. They're all over the place. So these are some of the things that we really need to address. And how do I address it? Well, the first thing is I set parameters. Whether you like it or not, this is how it is. So initially, you will have to force them into it. So when you force them, not exert pressure, you will have to be cynically persistent. That's perhaps the way. Yeah. You will have to be very persistent with them and consistent, because number one, they do value relationships. It's not that they don't, but the way they perceive relationships is very different. Perhaps it doesn't fit well with us. So what they do. But how should they lead their lives? Number one, put them in a parameter, because give them choices, option.
But what else should they?
You give.
That's okay. We give. But what choices and support to the Gen Z? What should I do?
Well, see, first thing, you start off with personal choices. That's always there. You will have to develop an integrity towards it. Because, you might not be committed to it.
But I should accept the reality around.
Yes, and you should show some integrity to it, because it's at the end of the day, it's going to feed you as a human being.
But am I really Gen Z interested, worried about getting fed?
Well, of course. First, of course. And third, if you're stuck, ask for help. Gen Zs don't ask for help. They suffer in silence.
But as a Gen Z, I don't ask for help. Is it because I don't trust?
They have trust issues. That's the reason they can't.
How do I build trust?
Well, see, that is where mentoring comes. That is where talking.
So what can I do as a leader, as a Gen Z leader?
You will have to speak your.
As a freak out, I should not get into dark alleys looking for somebody like me.
Substitutes. You don't look for substitutes. Rather, come out in the open and speak about it. That's what I mean when I say ask for help. It could be psychological, physiological, drug abuse, sexual promiscuity. It could be anything. Ask for help. See, that is the reason because they have trust issues with everything. Because can I trust him? Can I trust her? Because they have trust issues, they don't come out in the open and speak. Their psychological disorders multiply over a period of time.
I need to learn how to build trust. In fact, you know what, we have done an episode where
More than trust,
us.
they need to ask for help. That's one thing. When I pointed out their entitlement, when I said they are very entitled, the second thing that they'll have to come down to is ask for help, because that entitlement does not allow them to break that barrier of asking help with
You
others.
said it, absolutely. And that is why the next question that I have actually is, see, at the end of the day, we are now in 2025, and whoever are the Gen Zs or younger millennials today, and as our political leadership talks about Viksit Bharat in 2047, which is 22 years from now, I'm not going to be there. I'm pretty much sure you may be still there as a baby boomer of that day. But yet, the Gen Zs of today and the young millennials of today, they are the guys who are going to make Viksit Bharat a reality and live as leaders.
Yes.
Correct? Live as a leader. In 5 years' time, they are not the Gen Zs of today. They're already millennials of that day.
Absolutely.
Okay? And in another 10 years, they're the older millennials of that day. Now, I hear more, the middle management is going to vanish in organizations. Forget my opinion. But the point is, 10 years from now, a Gen Z who is 25, will be 35, and probably will be a middle manager. Doing different kind of work for sure. But I don't personally think, and you've experienced, that middle management is going to vanish. The kind of work will, and there's always change, right? I mean, nobody is doing the same work, at least for the last 30 years. Every kind of work has been changing, whether you say freshers or middle management or senior management, everything changes. So what are the challenges these Gen Zs will face to become the leaders of tomorrow?
Actually, in terms of the way they're going to work, we conducted a research recently with it was a joint operation with one of the organizations. We took up about 50,000 Gen Zs, the older and the newer ones, who are fresh from the oven going to the workforce, and some who are already matured in the workforce. Now, the interesting thing that we found out was they will follow their heart, that's for sure, because they're going to be very passionate about what they're going to do. They're going to build businesses big time. It's going to be a business of a very different kind. The leadership they're going to give is a very, very different type of leadership. Because, today the internet is so big, it's so vast. They don't need to rely on marketing, branding, middle management people to actually execute a lot of things.
I agree. But even 10 years or why 10 years, even 20 years from now, there are companies and managements and CEOs who are today's Gen Zs who are building buses and auto rickshaws or planes and trains and trams, and I don't know what else probably, which are deliberately talking about what is non-internet business. Of course, they use the internet. Everybody uses internet or AI or whatever in car. I can't see a future world where nothing is produced in factories anymore. That's not possible.
No, man.
They will be led by Gen Zs of today.
Absolutely.
What kind of leadership we need, not only in factories or in internet business, but also in society.
In terms of manufacturing, let's say, as you rightly said, we are progressing into different types and styles of manufacturing. Like, let's say 3D printers. We're making houses, we're building houses out of them. This is a Gen Z idea. Don't fret. It's a sustainable idea. You use plastics. They're cleaning up the oceans. They're using these recycled plastics to draw out clothing line, for instance. They're using all this. So the way how the Gen Zs are going to be, they're going to be extremely creative and innovative when it comes to leaders, future leaders. They're going to be brimming with innovation. They're going to be technology savvy people. They are not going to be people who are going to shy away from using technology to their benefit. And they will definitely tend to ignore the human element. That is something we see.
I mean, you mentioned that in your closing statement, but I was not actually really so much thinking about the human element because I probably different take on it, but I will probably approach that in the next and last question. But my point is this, that the Gen Z of today obviously will be the leaders leading the world, whether it is in manufacturing, it is an internet business or anything, running hospitals, running universities, everything that we have. And none of these things are going to go away. It can't be just be an internet-driven world. The point is this, that what kind of challenges they will face to become the leaders of tomorrow. Somebody who is able to innovate, somebody who is able to bring in a new idea, okay, makes the next leap possible. But that, having made the leap, you still has to be, old-fashioned word, executed for producing whatever that leap is supposed to create the impact for. So the innovator is one small cog in the entire cycle of change.
Absolutely.
Okay, innovator is not the change. I mean, inward is not the cycle. Okay, I mean, to use the metaphor that when you said that the millennials are on this last pay of journey from the seeing the internet or the technology NSR, you said. So what comes to my mind as a metaphor is that train came finally to a halt, which was like for post-World War, and it went up and up. Okay, created value, created the society that we got used to living in, right? And now there's a new train that the Gen Zs are boarding. But even this train has to travel a long distance.
Absolutely.
This train is not going to just go for the next year or so. And the guys who own the train, one day will be driving this train, and they will be the 40 years old or 50 years old one day. They are going to conk off in just 3 years from now. Okay, right? Despite climate change happening or not happening, whatever it is. So therefore, how will they mature into that? I mean, like nice wine, will they mature into very tasty, different bouquets, flavors of different kinds of wine? That's my last question, actually. Wow.
I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that they're going to do that. There are two things that I'd like to compare and contrast here. Number one, they're creative, they're innovative. They're going to find new ways and methodologies of work which suits their temperaments and working cultures. That's on one side. Let's park it aside. The second aspect, that where the challenge will come as a leader for them, will be largely psychological. Sometimes it can take shapes of pervertedness, criminal activities. It could also take social unrest. These are some of the things that will be the outcome of the way the generation is shaped. Because now today, most of the Gen Zs are lonely. They're not alone. They're lonely. They don't have people to speak to.
That's not only a sad place to be, it's also a dangerous place.
It's a very sad and a dangerous place at the same time. You told me that there's a 16-year-old boy who jumped off the cliff. That's not because he didn't have anything, because he was completely misunderstood and he felt extremely lonely.
He couldn't find his tribe.
Yeah, loneliness is something they will largely suffer with. It's already started. That is one aspect that the Gen Zs have to focus when they get into the role of leadership. That's number one. Keep their psychological health. Find meaning, whatever it could.
And like you said, find somebody to talk to.
Absolutely. Find meaning. Ask for help. This is one of the things Gen Zs don't do. When they don't know something, they are not willing to go and ask for help. This is going to create a pandemic of a different kind.
Absolutely.
It's going to be so bad that people don't know how to control this. The loneliness is something that they'll have to work upon. Psychological, physiological aspect, they will have to do. They will have to work on building trustworthy relationships, and trusting in people, machines, processes, whatever may be the case. They will have to learn to, it's like unlearning and learning again over a period of time.
That's exactly what was coming to their minds. More you kind of get into it as to what the Gen Zs of today have to learn, I think they have to also learn a few things, particularly on the behavioral side, particularly on the relationship side, that we all had to learn, irrespective of the labels. And I think that's something what probably gives you still the optimism, and it gives me also the optimism. Because I am pretty much sure the Gen Zs of today will mature into very beautiful bouquets of different kinds of wine. I'm very much sure about it. I don't know how, I don't know what. But on the other hand, drawing from what Allah you said, it's about they will learn how to build trust. They will learn how to also give commitment. They will also learn how to have relationships that they enjoy. Yeah. Probably this is a stage they are in their journey of life where they feel lonely, where they feel kind of, disconnected from what is around them.
Yes.
And so they're not the only people who are responsible for this disconnect. We, the so-called elders or seniors or the millennials or the Gen Xers, whoever, we obviously have more to be responsible for, because after all, whatever they were born into and they spend their formative years, and even today they are spending, it is we who created that. So we cannot just, point fingers at the so-called Gen Z or tomorrow Gen Alpha. I have a granddaughter who is a Gen Alpha now. And she's innocent. I mean, but she's growing up in a world that me and her parents created. So how can she be to blame alone?
Absolutely.
So last thoughts from you for the Gen Z in particular, Anala?
Be yourself, work on your dreams, ask for help, take care of your mental health.
Great. Thank you very much, Anala.
It's
And I will just add one line or to what you said, one thought, which is that find somebody that you can talk to. Whenever you feel angry, lonely, sad, any kind of those feelings, just find somebody to talk to. It could be a baby boomer like me. It could be a millennial, seeing a millennial. Or it could be a Gen Z too. Or it could be Gen Alpha. Yeah, up to you. But find somebody, find a human being to talk to, please. Thank you. Thank you for watching our channel. Thank you for subscribing to our channel. Please do put in your comments. And any questions that you have for Anala, myself, or Vinay, my good friend, and we will try to address that in our next episodes. Thank you very much for watching The Missing Link with Amit.